There's a massive uncharted hole on football's map of England, and it's all because of an overheard conversation with a pop star. At least that's one theory. Hello, I'm Ian Bent, and welcome to part 2 of Football on the Brink, which this week, in its quest to find the true importance of league status to a town, visits non-league Workington on the West Cumbrian coast. A victim of the vote following 26 years of league status, Workington learnt the hard way what a professional team is worth, bequeathing a treasure chest of golden stories.
Number 16 was my training number, because I think we only had 15 full-time pros and I was the only apprentice, and I was number 16.
At the end of the 1976-77 season, there was only one Football League club offering apprenticeships within 80 miles of Workington. At the start of the following season, there were none. So Jimmy Irvine was out of work.
I expected him to get the vote. I mean, they'd been in the Football League for years, and I know they'd struggled a while, but I never envisaged them going up the league, and it was the biggest shock in my life.
Jimmy Irvine was the last professional apprentice taken on by Workington Reds. 40 miles to the northeast, the nearest league club, Carlisle, had no youth or reserve team. So unless at 16 he could travel 5 hours each day, his football career was over before it started.
Out there used to be where the stand used to be, and as you see now, we've just got a small stand with about 30 or 40 seats. Most of it, apart from the popular side, the Derwent end, is still as it was when we got thrown out of the league, as you want to call it.
The re-election process, which, as we reported last week, had saved Hartlepool on 14 occasions, failed Workington. They finished bottom, and the patience of other chairmen who'd been asked to support the Reds for 4 years in a row ran out. On the first Friday in June 1977, news reached the banks of the River Derwent and Borough Park.
We were working on the pitch and we got a phone call saying that they'd been kicked out of the league, and well, I think I burst into tears and Billy did, and that was it. So no, it was just a shock, because we were preparing for the following season, getting the pitch ready and everything. That was my chance to turn a professional, going down the tubes, and that was it. So I'm very disappointed.
Billy is Billy Watson, groundsman and unofficial historian of the club.
To me, it was a terrible blow. I mean, that's all I had seen from when I came out of the army. It was league football. I joined them when they first got in, and I hadn't seen any other thing, and to be deprived of that, it was hard for me.
The groundsman's front room on the south side of Workington is a shrine to the club, and one former manager in particular.
Well, these are the letters what Bill sent me when he left Workington to go to Huddersfield.
Billy formed a lasting friendship with Bill Shankly, manager at Borough Park, for a short but memorable period in the 1950s. The two corresponded until Shankly's death.
And one of the little paragraphs here, if you have any news, I will be pleased to hear from you, as I will always have a soft spot for Workington. It was a challenge in the first instance, wasn't it? I mean, and it was always one for a fight. I mean, to me, and I suppose to Bill, there was no point in going to a big club where it was ready-made. But what a challenge if you were going to bring a team up from the bottom. He had this boyish attitude towards the game. He was always the first out with the ball. He had this sky blue tracksuit on with his Scotland badge on it, and he left that tracksuit when he left here to go to Huddersfield, and I kept that tracksuit top for years. And he put a team together there, and they played lovely football. I can remember one game, he kept standing up out of the trainer's box and looking to the grandstand and saying, "What do you think of that performance?" Not saying anything, but just looking, and I knew what he meant, and all the crowd were applauding him.
We're in a square bar with a few tables with black low-level seats around them, and a plaque on the wall. It says the Shankly Lounge, opened by Bill Shankly, OBE, 18th of August, 1980. Despite his later fame, Shankly never managed to get Workington out of Division 4, where they had been since election from the Northern Premier League in 1951. The Reds' only promotion was to come under Ken Furphy, 10 years after Shankly had moved on. After more than 200 games in Darlington's midfield, Furphy was advised to apply for the job as player-manager at Workington.
There was a large smoke-filled room, and there's 13 directors. And in the discussion that followed, I learned that they had no youth team, no reserve team, and only 10 full-time professionals. And one of the questions they asked me was, could I play right back? Apparently they didn't have a right back, so I said yes, although I was a midfield player, but I said yes.
So, with more directors than players, directors that apparently didn't even know what position he played, Ken Furphy embarked on a managerial career.
The attendances were, I think, 890 or something for Chesterfield, my first match, and I think we drew 1-1.
Furphy turned the club around. He founded a youth system and a reserve team and created the most successful side ever to wear Workington red.
They went up into what would now be the second division, and we performed well in it, really. So for a very small town, and really not a lot of people came to watch us. I would think in those days the average would have been around about 4,000 or 5,000, even though we were doing as well as we were. We still managed to reach those sort of heights.
Keith Birkinshaw, winner of FA and UEFA Cups with Spurs, veteran of more than 300 games for Workington, although he admits he didn't even know where it was when he signed from Liverpool.
I was about to get married, and I'd approached the Liverpool Football Club about married accommodation, and they more or less intimated that there would be nowhere for me. In those days, there was what you called club houses, and the football club owned a number of houses, and players were allowed to live in them. And really, I wanted somewhere to live. And that was the thing that persuaded me, because when I went to the place, I didn't even know where it was. I got to have a look on the map for a start off. I travelled up by train and got off at Carlisle, and then on a small line back into Workington, where I think the gas lights were still operating in those days, and I wondered where I was going to. Well, we had a good side then, which would amaze a lot of people. We played some terrific football. It wasn't just a matter of booting the ball. We played it out from the back, through the middle and up to the front. And we got some terrific results.
League Division 3. Workington 4, Port Vale 1.
I remember in one match in a League Cup game against Blackburn Rovers, where they had about 6 or 7 internationals in the side. We went there and we beat them 5-0 at Blackburn, which takes some doing.
The 200-mile round trip to Blackburn was a local derby for Workington, and in the days before the M6 and A66 improvements from Penrith, it would have been 3 hours each way. Visiting teams complained, but they only had to make the journey once a year. For Ken Furphy's team, every other match was over the hills and far away.
Bill Shankly, when he was there, he used to say to his players, "No, boys," he said, "we're 2 goals up before these people get off the bus." That was one of his sayings to his team there, and I suppose people didn't like all that travelling.
Workington 2, Bournemouth 0.
When you work it out, I used to travel from Workington with the team to Torquay. We would stay overnight, but we'd travel all the way back. We'd come back, we'd get back at 4 o'clock Sunday morning, and I've seen the time when most of the players were involved, we used to carry 11 shovels with us, because if we couldn't get through the lake, so we had to go back to Scotch Corner and work our way across that way. And several occasions we dug our way through snowdrifts and things like that.
Just 2 years before England won the World Cup, there were hardy full-time professionals digging their way through Lake District snow at 4 in the morning. Making Furphy the pioneer of an 11-man sweeper system. Halfway through the first season in Division 3, he left Workington for sunnier climes, Watford. Keith Birkinshaw took over, but the club only spent 1 more season in that division and was soon relegated back to the basement. By and large, although the club survived in the league for 10 more years, the good times were over. But the memories were still rich. Joan Crellin, now a director at the club and formerly secretary of the supporters club.
There used to be massive crowds at times, particularly if you played teams like Carlisle. You know, we used to get tremendous crowds then. Mostly from round here, you know. I suppose they brought travelling supporters with them, but a lot of them were from round here. But they like to see a winning team here. If you're not winning, they don't really want to come, unfortunately, you know. But we have had some massive crowds, yes.
I stepped on the straw in the 40s before Workington got into Football League.
Albert Murphy is the Football Association's county secretary in Cumbria, or Cumberland as the geographical traditionalists at the FA insist on calling it.
15 or 16,000 for the famous Blackpool match when they put the floodlights on. see the Matthews and the Morrisons. I was there when the great Manchester United team before the Munich disaster.
FA Cup, third round. Workington 1, Manchester United 3.
I mean, to me, Workington was football.
Whereas 21,000 had packed into Borough Park to see the Busby Babes, gates in the 70s dropped as low as 900. Workington were already selling players to survive. One of them was a promising local goalkeeper, John Burridge, who had a history of support for the club, although typically unorthodox.
I used to climb over the gate and keep me pesty money. We used to rush down and we used to, when the river was out, the Derwent at the back, you could actually get round, the back, and once you got in and you stood on the terrace and you could have a pasty.
Apparently never detected dodging the turnstiles, Burridge was spotted by the talent scouts and was soon an apprentice with the Reds.
I used to have to, go in Saturday morning, mark the pitch, put the nets right, and actually go and play in the first team. And then after the game, when there was an apprentice still playing, I would have to pick up the gear, put it on right side in when it was a muddy day, put it on in 2 old zinc baths, with Ariel in it, to let it soak, because I had to wash it on Monday morning, sweep the dressing rooms, bang the boots off, hang them up on the pegs, and then I was allowed to get a bath, and then I would ride on 10 miles to, to my pit village, where I lived, and I loved every minute of it. It was a great bringing up.
The pit village no longer has a pit. Workington lost the steelworks, which sustained it economically. And John Burridge is player-manager at Blythe Spartans, after a career which saw him play for more than 20 different league clubs. In 1977, he was with Blackpool, while Workington embarked on their last and least successful season in the league. Joan Crellin again.
It was the kind of season you want to forget, and yet you can't forget because that was your last year in the league. I think I travelled to almost every match I could get to that year.
Halifax Town 6, Workington 1.
I think inwardly I had this feeling that perhaps this was the last time we were going to be able to go to all those games. And I even had the honour of going on the team coach for the very first time to Newport for the last match in the league.
Newport County 1, Workington 0.
I must admit, I sat in the stand and cried afterwards.
I think a lot of them were disappointed.
Jimmy Irvin, who, as the club's only apprentice, was also on the coach.
I think a lot of them in the end just took it for granted that Working were a struggling side, and we were only getting a gate of 1,500 at that time, and they weren't really interested in that much. But 2 or 3 years later time, they must have realised how good it was to have a professional side in the league, and I mean, now, if we got one, I think we'll get the gates back, but at that time they didn't realise that a good thing for the town of Working, publicity, it's mentioned every week. As I say, it was just a bit of apathy, I think.
Workington conceded 102 goals that season and lost 32 games before losing the vote, replaced by Wimbledon from the Southern League. Bob Johnson, a former FA County Secretary, was one of the Reds' bitter and confused fans, feeling betrayed.
There was names called everybody for not voting for them, and it was all mentioned about other teams who had been down below and they owed money and everything and they got back into the league. So it was a great disappointment to most people.
And something of a surprise. After all, Hartlepool, Halifax, Southport and Crewe had all sought the vote more times than Workington and survived.
I've been to various first, second division grounds, and nearly all of them were in favour of Workington staying in the league. But an article in the Watford Gazette finished it.
Watford, then a Division 4 side, had Elton John as their chairman. The story that is said to have appeared in the paper centred on an after-match conversation between the pop singer and Tony Perry, the Workington chairman. Mr. Perry was supposedly overheard and quoted saying that Workington had no chance of surviving re-election for a 4th successive year. The article did the rounds of the club boardrooms and, in the minds of some Reds fans, is to blame for sending out a "don't bother voting for Workington" message.
And that is what I blame for Workington coming out of the league. I definitely think if that article hadn't been written, Workington would have still been in the league.
May well be. I mean, Elton John, he did fly up to the match at Workington, which I remember quite well.
Tony Perry. Could it really be that his loose talk to Elton John sent his club out of the league?
I don't think they were the material factor. I mean, I can't particularly recall making them, but I can't deny it is the sort of thing that I'm capable of saying. No, I don't think that would have affected the outcome.
Nevertheless, Tony Perry is the man blamed by some people for the Reds going under.
I suppose they've got to look for a scapegoat, but I'm not aware that was the case. I think most people realised that in my time as chairman, no one had tried harder. Well, I stopped the practice of selling the best players, and we did buy every player or acquire every player that was recommended to us by our managers. But no, I don't doubt some people are bound to blame me as the chairman of the club, and to some extent maybe so, but it isn't a one-man band.
Tony Perry claims to have petitioned hard for support among the top clubs, persuading chairmen who had never even visited Workington to keep the town on football's national grid.
It was my job as the chairman. It caused me no difficulties, no anxieties, no embarrassments. One had to do it if you wanted to be re-elected, and I was quite happy to do as much as I could.
The fact that it wasn't enough, according to Mr. Perry, is down to a change in the voting system. Up until 1976, any number of non-league hopefuls could put themselves forward for election to the league. It worked to the advantage of clubs like Workington.
And often you'd have up to 12 clubs in the ballot. Well, it so split the vote. It did give the existing league club, in my opinion, a substantial advantage over all the non-leaguers. And we were probably the first club to be caught out under the change system, in that they only allowed 2 non-league clubs to come forward. Now that's reduced the splitting of the vote tremendously. Quite frankly, any one of the bottom 4 were suspect.
4 years in a row, Workington had spent the month of May begging other clubs for their support. In 1976, they'd survived by only 3 votes, with the non-league votes split between 8 candidates. The following year, with only 2 non-league applicants, the results from the Football League jury were as follows.
Halifax Town 44, Hartlepool United 43, Southport 37, Wimbledon 27, Workington 21, Altrincham 12.
By this time, Keith Birkinshaw was at Spurs and was sent as that club's representative to the annual general meeting of the Football League. He'd seen the best days that Workington ever had. Now he was to see the worst.
I felt very sorry because I'd had so many happy times and there were so many happy memories. Of course I was sorry, yes. But after saying that, I'm not always sure that the town supported the club as strongly as they might have done. If they had, then possibly they'd have still been in the league.
Unfortunately for Workington, and I really think this was the crunch of it, the 2 clubs coming forward, one was Wimbledon, who had adequate warning and did a magnificent propaganda job. They spent a fortune on a brochure. The other competitor was Altrincham, who had a tremendous record and should have had a good run against us. But unfortunately, they didn't realise or know until very late on that they were going to be the other club. And they made, with all respect to them, a half-hearted effort at best to get in. And the result, if you look, is that had the votes been better split between Wimbledon and Altrincham, Workington would have been re-elected. So that, in my opinion, is the reason why, at the end of the day, we weren't re-elected.
Maybe it was Tony Perry's fault, or the Watford newspaper reporter, or the change in the voting system. Or perhaps, as some people think, clubs just got tired of the long trek across the Lake District. Whichever theory you choose, the result is the same.
Unibond League Division 1. Worktop 3, Workington 2.
Ladies and gentlemen, our other 2 teams from this game. Workington side, in goals, Michael Walker. Number 2, Nigel Dustin.
Workington, once as high as 3rd place in the old 3rd division, are a lowly non-league side. 100 other teams are ahead of them in the queue for league football, and they play to crowds of 250.
I don't think they can go much lower than what we are now. I mean, obviously you can go lower than what we are, but being realistically, I think this is the lowest that I would like to see them going. I mean, it's back into the Northern League and back into the North Eastern League if we go to this, and I don't think we will. I mean, as I say, it's starting on the up again, and we've all got to start afresh, and hopefully we'll turn things around.
Sad though the plight of Workington is, their official history is called So Sad, So Very Sad. The real loser, it can be argued, is football in general. If any of these young footballers messing about near the town centre are any good, then they'll have to travel. With Workington out of the league, professional football has no representation on the west coast from Blackpool to Carlisle, a large soccer desert in which the only oasis was voted out.
Well, actually, it just made that area out on a limb, you can say, because there was no potential for any of them to go anywhere.
Bob Johnson, secretary of the FA in Cumberland in the 1970s, the man with the job of promoting soccer in Cumbria.
You didn't get many people coming to see local football from the likes of Preston or Newcastle. And, as you say, Carlisle had no youth programme, so it was given very little chance for any of the young lads to get on. It was something to look forward to for the lads, the kids in Workington, to get a game of football for the Reds.
John Burridge, a beneficiary of professional football in Workington as a career move, knows that now the route is closed.
I'll go down and watch the Reds, and I would stand there, and it was nostalgia just to watch there and think, well, I used to be there. This is what gave me my big break. This is what kept me out of the pits. To see it now, I think a lot of lads are not going to be able to do what I've done.
The FA's current man in Workington, Albert Murphy, now sees the demise of league football reflected in the fashion trends.
I mean, you can see this in the boys that walk around with all the shirts from different clubs, and there's very, very few, less than 1%, that's got a Cumberland club shirt on. All the rest are the Manchesters, the Blackburns or the Arsenals.
And while no one can deny the achievements of Wimbledon, did football need another South London club as much as it needed a West Cumbrian outpost? This is the best publicity Workington have had in recent years. Channel 4's Big Breakfast sponsored the club for 2 seasons.
Yes, all the way from the Lake District. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh dear. Workington AFC from the Unibond.
It was not, though, the catalyst to great strides forward. A couple of mentions on a weekday morning is no substitute for a regular spot on a Saturday afternoon. Director Joan Crellin again.
Well, for a start, not even seeing the name come up on the television every week, I think that helps the town. If it comes on there and you're remembered, recognised around the country, you know. Now you go and they say, don't remember Workington, where is it? But at that time, it was coming on the screen every week and people knew we were there. And I think it kept the town, well, the name of the town, nationally known. And then once it went, everything went downhill, really. It was bad for the town.
Any visitor to Workington will find it strange that a town of 30,000 ever managed to justify 3 sports stadia. The Lonsdale Park dog track has closed, but the rugby league ground at Derwent Park is getting along fine. Sandwiched between is Borough Park. No one under 25 can remember league football there. The town lost it and will probably never get it back. Next week, Football on the Brink visits a club that did come back, despite everything being stacked against it. Until the same time next week, goodbye.
This is 5 Live on 909 and 693 medium wave. News and sport from the BBC.